Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the regularly scheduled Las Cruces Economic Recovery Ad Hoc Board meeting. It is currently 10 a.m. on September the 10th, and I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. With that being said, can I please ask now if there is any conflict of interest that you please do raise your hand and we will call on you and deal with that matter at this time. Awesome. As I'm seeing no hands being raised, we're going to go ahead and move on to the acceptance of the agenda. The agenda was sent out. I hope you all had a chance to take a look at it. I know that there. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Debbi Moore, Greater Las Cruces Chamber, for the record. Regarding item number, the discussion item with childcare, I do have Ashley Echeverria on the phone with on the call with Boys and Girls Club, but Dr. Trujillo is going to be late. So I would ask that maybe we switch numbers 1 and 2 and see if she's on. Her call should be ending really soon, but I want to make sure we have that item where she can address that.
Okay, perfect. So
I would move that motion to switch 1 and 2. I hope that's okay with Ashley. I've got one speaker on and one speaker off, so I don't know if we separate them or not. So, Mr. Chair, we might ask Ashley.
I see Ashley on. Ashley, is that going to be okay with you, ma'am?
That's okay. That's not a problem.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we do have a motion on the table to, under item V discussion, switching 1 childcare, which is going to be a big one, with 2 City of Las Cruces business fee schedule. We have to have a second for that to go through. Mr. Fitzherbert.
This is Sharon Thomas.
Okay, Sharon, if you can just make sure that you do raise your hand for the chat box. Mr. Fitzherbert, you had your hand raised as well, sir.
I was going to second the motion, Ron Fitzherbert, for the record.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Fitzherbert. Okay, so I have a motion on the floor from Ms. Debbie Reynolds. I do have a second from Ms. Sharon Thomas to switch 1 and 2 under discussion. Do I have any discussion on that change at this time? Okay, as I'm seeing none, if I can please get a roll call vote on the motion at hand to change the discussion items.
This is on the motion to move agenda item number 2 to the first place and agenda item number 1 to the second place. Mr. Michael Harris.
Yes.
Mr. George Miller. Mr. George Miller is absent. Ms. Sharon Thomas.
Yes.
Ms. Brooke Montgomery.
Yes.
Ms. Veronica Archuleta.
Yes.
Mr. Ron Fitzherbert.
Yes.
Mr. Doc Cowan.
Yes.
Ms. Susan Greenwald.
Yes.
Ms. Jolene Martinez. Ms. Jolene Martinez is absent. Ms. Darleen Lopez.
Yes.
Motion passes.
You forgot me.
Oh, my apologies. True.
Okay, I vote yes
Mr.
as
Chair,
well.
my apologies, Mr. Chair.
It's okay.
And Debbi Moore, for the record, I vote yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, motion does pass unanimously, so we will have those 2 discussion items changed. Okay, moving on to the agenda again with the amended agenda. Is there any other comments, questions, or concerns before we do a roll call vote on the amended agenda? Sorry.
Mr. Chair, Debbi Moore, for the record. Point of clarification with staff, do we need to have another motion to accept the minutes as amended?
The agenda?
Yes, the new agenda.
I believe so, unless there's any other changes.
So moved.
Okay. We have a movement to accept the amended agenda. Do I hear a second?
This is Michael Harris. I'll second that.
Perfect. We have a motion from Ms. Debbi Moore and a second from Mr. Harris. Any discussion on the amended agenda as presented to us at this time? As I am seeing none, can I please get a roll call vote on the acceptance of the agenda as amended?
This is on the acceptance on the agenda as amended. Mr. Michael Harris,
Yes.
Mr. George Miller is absent. Ms. Sharon Thomas,
Yes.
Ms. Brooke Montgomery,
Yes.
Ms. Veronica Archuleta,
Yes.
Mr. Ron Fitzherbert,
Yes.
Mr. Doug Cowan,
Yes.
Ms. Susan Greenwald,
Yes.
Ms. Jolene Martinez is absent. Ms. Darleen Lopez,
Yes.
Ms. Debbi Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay, so motion does pass. We do have our agenda as presented. We have minutes to approve as well. You all received those minutes. Is there any discussion on those minutes as presented? I see no discussion being heard, no hands being raised. Okay, do we entertain I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented from the last meeting.
This is Michael Harris. I'll motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, so I have a motion from Mr. Harris to accept the minutes as presented to us. Do I hear a second on that motion?
This is Doug Cowan. I'll second.
Okay, I have a second by Mr. Cowan that we approve the minutes as presented. Is there any further discussion on the minutes? As I'm seeing no hands raised and nothing being said, can I please get a roll call vote on accepting the minutes as presented from the September 3rd meeting?
This is on the approval of the minutes as they were presented. Mr. Michael Harris,
Yes.
Mr. George Miller is absent. Ms. Sharon Thomas,
Yes.
Ms. Brooke Montgomery,
Yes.
Ms. Veronica Archuleta,
Yes.
Mr. Ron Fitzherbert,
Abstain.
Mr. Doug Cowan, Mr.
Yes.
Doug Cowan,
Yes.
Ms. Susan Greenwald,
Yes.
Ms. Jolene Martinez is absent. Ms. Darleen Lopez,
Yes.
Madam Vice Chair,
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Okay, so we have the approval of our minutes and the agenda. So moving on, we do have the amended agenda. So we will be looking at number 2 under discussion first, which is the City of Las Cruces business fee schedule. This is something that I kind of requested at the last meeting as something that maybe we can look at to maybe make some changes, or if there's anything that we can maybe suggest that will alleviate any kind of burden on businesses at that time, something that is an actionable item that we can do here and now. So that's kind of why I put this on the agenda. Francisco, I do see your hand raised. Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chair, I invited Mr. Tim Pitts, Deputy Director of Community Development, for the meeting. He is in charge of the one-stop shop for businesses and permits in the City of Las Cruces. and he is well versed into the fees as well as into the registration requirements. So he is part of the
Perfect.
discussion in here.
Wonderful. That would be great. Did we by any chance get that fee scheduled through the policy, through the website, to the rest of the board? If not, can we do that really quick so they can take a look at it in the meantime?
Mr. Chair, I sent it as a link. I can send those
Okay.
links to everyone else in the meantime.
Perfect. That way they can kind of take a look at it while we're having a discussion. Miss Debbi Moore, not Miss Debbie Reynolds, but Miss Debbi Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Debbi Moore for the record, and I'd love to have Debbie Reynolds' money, but thank you for the compliment. Mr. Chair, I do have an idea, a thought of that, a suggestion we could move forward, is that it is my understanding, and certainly Mr. Pitts can correct me if I'm wrong, the one fee that impacts every business would be the business registration fee. That is currently at $45. My recommendation, that is not a motion at the present time, it is simply an idea I'm throwing out there for discussion. It would be for this board to recommend to the city council that that fee be waived for one solid year. Whenever they would begin and start that year, it would just have to be 1 year to be impactful. While the dollars are not potentially that great to a business, it certainly would show good faith as a whole from this board and the city council to it is one again, the tool in the toolbox to waive that fee for a year. So I just laid that out there on the table for discussion. Anything else? I believe Mr. Pitts could address this, and he might review some of the general ones, would be of impacting industry sectors, and that would probably raise flags for the anti-donation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And with that being said as well, I think that's exactly what this kind of discussion is one of those good faith discussions where they're very nominal fees. If you go through the website, which is the City of Las Cruces, it's library.municipalmunicode.com/nm/Las Cruces, which you'll get forwarded right now. But there's a lot of fees in here that do pertain to even small business owners. There's one for flea markets, food vendors, pawnbrokers, Christmas tree sales, things like that. Very small business, very local, that we can kind of look at and think, yeah, this is a good faith effort that the City of Las Cruces waives this fee for a year for small business, medium-sized business owners that can make a difference. With that being said, we do, here's Ms. Trujillo, Dr. Trujillo, let's get her in here. With that being said, we do have, good morning, Dr. Trujillo, how are you? With that being said, we do have a couple hands raised. Mr. Harris, let's go ahead with you first, and then we are gonna talk about everything else that we need to get going on that.
Sure. So this is Michael Harris for the record. I agree that the waiving these fees is probably a nominal impact to business because it's $45, but it would show a lot of faith from the city, and it would also be a significant expense probably for the city. And so I guess my question is, could some of the CARES Act grants be used to subsidize that fee being waived in a similar way to like how the buses are going fare free and they're able to use some federal money to cover that expense?
Okay, I think that's a good question. Also, you said it's a nominal fee for the business owners, but $45 to the City of Las Cruces is probably a lot less than to the business owner. So I think that's definitely something that we can look at. Mr. Cohen had his hand up, then Griselda, and then Mr. Harris just re-raised his hand. I see. Oh, just Doug Cohen. Mr. Cohen, go ahead.
Thank you, Doug Cowan here. I have a question, and maybe Mr. Chair, you can answer this one with regards to some of these fees. I know that the city has special permitting for the new patio, the outside dining scenario. And so are there fees associated with getting that permitted and approved for the outside dining and expanding that for the restaurants here in town? Is there a cost associated with that to those businesses?
I am not the person to ask. I was not affected by that, but I think Mr. Pitts would definitely have that answer. Mr. Pitts, do you want to go ahead and hop on and answer that question, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Tim Pitts, Deputy Director of Community Development. Just to clarify, the business registration fee is $35 a year, and I believe it's set by state statute. And we have just we've just re-adopted that within our own code. I'm not positive that we can waive that. I'll have to look at the statute and see how that works. But getting back to this question of the outdoor dining for the emergency situation, we have adopted a zero fee review and inspection of the dining, outdoor dining, and we usually go in and make some recommendations on making it safer, making sure that the people are safe when they're dining outside. They have bathroom facilities and so on. That's really what we're looking for.
Perfect. Okay, so it looks like doing that quick outdoor patio for restaurants and small businesses is a fee-free service that we're doing right now, which is great. Is there anyone else that has taken a look at those fees and can see anything that maybe says maybe we can do something with that? I think like food vendors is one. I know that there's fees associated with like a food truck right now when they set up. Special events, we're not really doing special events right now. Temporary stand, seasonal merchandise, non-seasonal merchandise. Maybe we can even look at getting with the outdoor market, the Las Cruces outdoor market on Saturdays and Wednesdays, and see if there's some kind of fee that we can work out with them for a reduced fee for those small business owners or one-time business owners that are trying to sell their goods at the market. I think that's something that we can definitely be looking at. Mr. Harris, and then we'll go to Ms. Montgomery. I see both your hands raised.
I was just going to say, I haven't seen a link yet. So if you have a URL, maybe you can repeat it a little slower so that we can get it in, or I don't know if someone was going to email that.
Okay, cool. Actually, Adrian, do you think you can actually just open up the chat box to send that link out really quick so we can all get that immediately, and then we can close the chat again?
Let me see one second.
Okay.
You know what? Since we've disabled chat altogether, it doesn't even give the option
Okay.
for chat. Yeah, it doesn't even let me allow chat at this point.
Okay, cool. We Francisco, can you go ahead and just forward that out to them? I know I have it from our previous conversation.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to double check. This is Francisco Paredes for the record, that we're looking at the same stuff. Is this from the links that I sent you via email for the approval?
It is,
of the
sir. It
distribution?
is the municipal code fees.
Excellent. I'll forward that then to everyone, and that email should be coming in on its way.
Okay, perfect. I appreciate that, Francisco. We're going to go to Brooke, and then I see that we have Ms. Martinez on. So go ahead, Brooke.
I went to the fee page real quick for home-based businesses. And I think
Did you say state page or the city page?
I'm on the city page.
Okay, cool.
And I don't know, I was listening to, I wasn't fully clear if we have the ability to waive the fees, but and Michael Harris, you had brought up that maybe the CARES grant can cover them, but I do see that there's an annual renewal fee for home-based businesses. I'm on the home-based business one. So, and then like you said, the food vending wagons and trucks, $40 per vehicle, but there's also a fee for nonprofits that are based at home, which during this time, there may be more nonprofits arising to help the economy and food security. So if we're going to be able to maybe cover some of the fees, the reoccurring fee, and the nonprofit fee might be good ones to look at. I think you're muted.
Okay, so the at home and the nonprofit is what you're looking at. At home, nonprofit.
It says that there's, and so I'm just on this page, but there's a $25 fee for nonprofits for the city, not the state fees. And then there's a late fee of $10 if they don't do it in time and date. So anyway, so those
Okay.
ones, I thought, you know, there are people discussing different nonprofits arising and why impede them in any way if we can.
Got it. Okay. I think those are good. Griselda, go ahead really quick. You did have your hand raised, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, Griselda Martinez for the record. So just a couple of items for clarification. The first one is on Mr. Harris on the question related to CARES Act. So how the CARES Act worked for the city of Las Cruces, because of our size, the funding that came from the federal government went to the state. And then the state opened up an RFP process for disbursements of those funds. So the city actually had to apply for those funds. So it's a twofold approach on the CARES Act with this different consideration. Bigger cities, 500,000 and above, receive the funding directly. We didn't. And so what we did was the first item is reimbursement of cost associated to COVID. And what the city did was a compilation of costs associated, and that's where the bus rides, it's included. And then the second element is related to the small business continuity grant. That will be a program that will be grant for businesses, small businesses within the city. And then there will be another, a separate program administered by the county and the Greater Chamber for the county businesses. And that will be cash for businesses who apply. And so I wanted to clarify those items related to CARES Act. And then on the farmers market, all farmers market businesses are registered as regular businesses. And that's one of the requirements that we have for the farmers market to ensure that they help us with that to ensure compliance.
With the farmers market though, it's handled by a third party entity, correct? That collect fees. Is there any way we can start looking at working with them to see if we can do like waiving fees until the first of the year for new business owners that are going in that are doing at-home projects or something like that to make ends meet?
Mr. Chair, so and I will ask Dr. Pitts to chime in here. My understanding is their registration, the businesses in the farmers market are registered as a regular business. And there may be some additional fees that are worked between the vendors and the actual farmers market for which we don't have any control over. So for the registration as a business, that would fall under the regular business registration that was discussed before.
Okay, perfect.
Dr. Pitts, do you have, is that an accurate statement?
Thank you, Dr. Martinez and Mr. Chair. Tim Pitts with Community Development. Yeah, it is, and I want to make just a couple of comments. One is nonprofits are explicitly exempted from paying business registration fees. We do ask that they be that they give us, we call that a notification of their location, and because we have the same concerns about safety of occupants and employees as we do for any other business. But there is no business registration fee for a nonprofit, even if they're home-based. And I'd be interested in knowing where it references that, because under section 16-128 of the Las Cruces Municipal Code, it explicitly exempts nonprofits. But on the part of what we're doing, for instance, with the farmers market businesses, is that the state, part of our business registration process is ensuring that the state, they are following state statutes on paying their taxes, recording their locations, making sure that they're paying their taxes to the right locations. That's mostly GRTs, but also property taxes, and so on. So it's a compliance method. And again, I would have to look in to see what fees would be possible to waive and what would not. But all of it would have to be done by ordinance, or it would have to be paid from another source on things that are not explicitly if they have a fee in the schedule.
Okay, perfect. So we can definitely look at that more in depth on our end. I think Susan Greenwald, go ahead, and then we'll go to Brooke and then Michael.
Mr. Chair, Susan Greenwald for the record. Not to be the wet blanket of this conversation, but I kind of am. So if we are asking, I don't know how many businesses are in the city, even if we say there's 1,000 businesses, which I'm assuming there's at least 2 or 3 times that many, we're asking for $35,000 of fees that don't go to the city. But we're then going to ask for other programs like help with childcare, the scholarship program. If it's a nominal fee for the business, like, is it worth asking the city not to expect that revenue to come to them if we're going to be asking for other assistance? Does that make sense?
I'll speak to that as a small business owner. I think a nominal fee for me is definitely different than a nominal fee for the city of Las Cruces. And with that being said, I think $35 out of my pocket, or, there's a lot bigger fees on there as well for small business. I mean, we're just looking at the business registration fee that Ms. Debbi Moore put forward, but there's also $40 per setup of your food truck, or there's also fees like that. $30 to $45 for an individual business owner probably doesn't seem like a lot, but it can be. I mean, that's going to the grocery store and buying groceries for your week, especially in this time. But also the city of Las Cruces does have a lot of fees or a lot of money set aside to help small business in the economy, and that's why we're all here today. So I understand where that comes from, but also I think it's really kind of shallow in a way for us to say what is nominal to a small business and what's nominal to the city of Las Cruces, in my personal opinion. I'm sorry, I know that sounds pretty bad, but times are tough.
Well, I don't think my comment was shallow. I want to clarify that. Like, I don't think it was a shallow concern. Nominal was the word that was used by you.
For the city of Las Cruces, correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not saying that it's not an issue. I would say that maybe waiving that fee for everyone maybe isn't, I mean, I agree that it's a compliance issue for businesses to make sure that they are paying their taxes and all of those kind of things. Maybe setting aside a fund for like an emergency kind of grant program, saying, here's $5,000 that the city's going to set aside for fees for businesses who are struggling during this time. Right. I think there's some other ways to approach it. That's my comment.
No, definitely. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I appreciate the comment. Yeah. Next is Ms. Brooke Montgomery, and then we'll go to Mr. Harris.
Brooke Montgomery for the record. I agree. It does seem that some of the fees are less than others when I'm looking at this fee page. By the way, the nonprofit fee was listed on the business registration application. That is the printout one. And it's under the last page. It's listed on the top for registering a business, and then it's listed on the bottom with an annual renewal fee of $25. So I don't know if it's accurate, but it's on the page for registering a business when I Googled it. under the document center of lascruces.org. But anyways, so I just wanted to point that out. If it's not accurate, it's on there. The fees, I would agree, because I help students register, well, you know, go through the process of starting and growing their businesses. And they add up for the students. So sometimes we have to re-meet because they have the state fee for $50. And then they're getting their taxes and their state tax, you know, and their EIN. And then they have to do their Las Cruces fees. And I think for the students, it is, you know, you add the 50 plus the 35, and then they need 85, and they're already kind of like, you know, in school, may or may not be working full time. So they come back a couple weeks later when they have some money, or a month later. Not all students are like that, but I would say it's pretty common from what I see, that the fees could be a barrier. They often do home-based businesses. And I do see childcare and babysitting listed. And if we're talking soon about childcare, we may want to revisit that, because then they have to pay the $50 fee to register with the state and the 35. And on the one that I think, Chris, you were referring to, there's some pretty high fees for like special seasonal. I mean, to do Christmas stands, to pay $50 for 90 days, every 90 days, and then $150 for special events. It does say flea market is $50 per event. And I guess that doesn't count the, you know, I don't know what that counts, but maybe we should look into that, because that adds up, $50 per event to go to a flea market. And so as a community, and talking about economic development, you know, somebody might say, I'm just not going to register and I'm just going to go sell things to my friends, or they might have to wait and miss out on an opportunity to sell seasonal items and we're coming into holiday season. And this may be an avenue for people to make money. So I do think it adds up.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Montgomery. And with that too, with the holiday season coming around, and you know, we always are doing those events that we're at the convention center, as we're not doing big events, but being able to sell those holiday trinkets, you have to get your business license. I mean, it can add up after a time. Mr. Harrison, we'll go to Mr. Pitts, who's probably going to answer all of our questions that we just did.
Yeah, this is Michael Harris for the record. I guess I'll open with a question for Mr. Pitts, which is how much of community development's budget comes from these fees, and you know, what percentage are we looking at? And then I guess I'll also express my skepticism that this is, I mean, I'm looking at this fee table, and as a business owner, I don't see that eliminating any of these fees would have any meaningful impact on a business, really. I mean, $85 to register your business as a student, okay, I can see how that might prevent you from registering your sole proprietorship as a student. But I mean, there's 3,000 businesses roughly in the city, I think, from previous presentations. Just in the business renewal fee, you know, $35 is nothing to any business in town. That would keep you operating for an hour or two, maybe. But to the city, you know, over 3,000 businesses, that's 100 grand. So that's 3 people's salaries. So, you know, if this is meaningfully impacting the city budget, I guess my concern is, are we going to make a good faith effort to, you know, help businesses save $35 and then lay 3 people off at the city, or 2 or 3 people? That doesn't seem like a very good trade. And so anyway, I'm interested to know, you know, how much money out of the city budget are we really talking? That's why I brought up the point about, you know, if we were to recommend the city do this, do they have a way to get reimbursed for these funds somehow? And it seems that existing CARES Act money is already spoken for, and that already would have had to have been applied for. So anyway, that's my concern, is that, yeah, $35 means nothing to the city, but $35 times 3,000 businesses means a lot. So it adds up even faster to the city. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Pitts. We'll probably answer all those questions. Thanks.
Actually, before we go to Mr. Pitts, can we, let's just hit Miss Debbi Moore. I know that she has her hand raised, and then Mr. Pitts can take over and just tell us everything.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Debbi Moore for the record. I would like clarification. Several fees have been mentioned. I obviously just mentioned one, but I would certainly like point of legal clarification on how the anti-donation clause would fit into any of our recommendations of this. To Mr. Cowan's point a while ago regarding the tents, obviously that impacted just a few people. So I would like legal clarification before we proceed with any full recommendations on how that anti-donation would fit in the equation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Pitts, you're up, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll answer. I got a bunch of things written down, so I'll try and answer them. If I miss something, please remind me. But to the budget, the community development revenues, or at least I'm sorry, building safety revenues, which includes the business registration portion of our business, brings in about $1.2 million in revenues in a year, or we did in 2019, and business registrations accounted for $176,798. I don't know where the 53 cents came from. It's somewhere, but anyway, and 53 cents. About half of that is from business registrations as the $35. So Mr. Harris's estimate is about right, that probably somewhere between 80 and 100,000 is from that $35, and then the rest, the bulk of it comes from liquor licenses. There's a lot of work we do associated with liquor licenses. There's a lot of work we do, and they have much higher fees, and generally paid by probably not the businesses you're necessarily thinking of. You know, that's usually Walmart and those sorts of places, but maybe some restaurants. It's a pretty big amount. He's 250 for. I'm not seeing it in short order. It's somewhere in this in the code. About half of the businesses that we register are home-based. So you know, somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 home-based businesses, and it's always in flux. We have businesses that don't renew but are still open. We have businesses that renew and then close in 2 months, and so on. So it's difficult to get an actual count at any one time of how many businesses are there, but I think 2,500 is a good estimate. In terms of anti-donation, it's my understanding that as long as the program is across the board and adopted, available to everybody equally, that anti-donation does not apply. So I think that we can get around that. We obviously would need legal to weigh in on that to make sure anything that was done would cover that. And then the other thing I had written down was on the nonprofits again. That printout that you have is an old one. I mean, I'm going to have to go find where it is and get it updated with the correct information. If you actually came in and registered a nonprofit, we would not charge you a fee. But that was changed in the code about, I want to say maybe 10 years ago. So that's an old piece of paper. And it doesn't surprise me we have that somewhere up on the website. It's very difficult to find all the documents we have and get them up to date. So, but I will definitely go and look for that one and get that information corrected.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Ms. Montgomery.
Thank you, Mr. Pitts. I can email it to you also. I guess clarification. So about half of 176,000 goes to business registration for, or this is kind of guessing because they close, they may open and close, but for home-based businesses. Do you think that they're more likely to register their business if we waive the fee temporarily and then pay taxes? Or are we risking that they work and not register and just sell things for seasonal money or money during this time. Because if they decide to just not pay taxes, which I mean, hopefully they're not doing, do we bring in more money by easing the way for them to become a home-based business? And I know it's only $35, so I don't know if it is, if we decide that it's a pressing issue. But if we waive it and they start making money, maybe they'll pay taxes.
Go ahead, Mr. Pitts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it's an interesting question. It's one we wrestle with every day. We are pretty sure that in the current crisis that we are about 20 to 30% down on people actually pulling permits for construction work. And the question is, how much are we going to enforce that? As part of our role is to ensure that the state is getting its GRT revenue. And that's part of why we do this. It's a compliance issue, and I have a hard time getting a good estimate of that. Home-based businesses are very difficult to monitor. We don't want to go into someone's home and tell them that something's unsafe. It's their home, and it's not really. But it's also their place of business, and there are rules, and there's so it's just, that's been a very difficult part for us to deal with as an enforcement agency, is those home-based businesses. So we generally look for voluntary compliance in that regard. If they're doing something that is disturbing to their neighbors, that's when we will out there. And as Dr. Martinez mentioned, we do when they're operating at the farmers market and other places like that out in the public, we do ask them to have their registrations properly. It's a good question, and I think you guys might be better suited to answer whether we would get better compliance if we just got people registered with their paying GRT and other forms of taxes. I can't, I'm having a difficult time telling myself.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think that's a good question to be asking, actually. Ms. Debbi Moore.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you, Debbi Moore, for the record. A quick, just a clarification, Mr. Pitts, on regarding the enforcement of the GRT. Is that a task that the city has, or would that be more on a statewide? And then again, I just really think that the clarification from legal, I would like a legal opinion. I understand the anti-donation, I understand being equal across the board, but I just think I would like to personally see a statement from the city attorney regarding this, because as we move forward with some recommendation that could tap into the city budget and potentially could have impacted several industries, I know that I would just personally like to see a statement from the city attorney on it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. With that being said, I think that's actually a really good idea. I think we need to get some answers as far as anti-donation clause and what that means for the city of Las Cruces, and to what this board can actually suggest to the county or to the city council. So what I'm going to recommend, and it would take a motion, is that we postpone this for a week, and in that week time frame we get an answer from the city attorney, which should be pretty quickly because I'm sure they get these questions a lot. And then second, I think in that motion it should also ask that we get some kind of letter of feasibility, whether it's from the city manager or from the economic development department or whoever wants to tell us if this is feasible or not for us to be talking about today. Because I know it's a lot of money overall, but I also know that our job is to suggest something to the city council to alleviate the burden and to reopen the economy. And this is something that does that. You have to spend money to make money and all that great stuff. So I think we're at that point, and I do see that we have Dr. Karen Trujillo on, and we do have that child care discussion here in a few seconds. So I see Ms. Debbi Moore's hand raised. Ms. Debbi Moore, I'm thinking you might have a motion for us.
I do have a motion, but just prior to that, I would also like clarification for next week on the usage of CARE Acts. I know as Dr. Martinez just mentioned, we will be giving grants if there's any other dollars impacted or available for that. With that said, Mr. Chair, I move that this item of discussion regarding the fee schedule be tabled at the present time and brought up again at the next meeting with clarification numbers, clarification information regarding legal anti-donation and other information as requested by this board.
Thank you. Great motion. Ms. Montgomery.
Ms. Brooke Montgomery, for the record, I second the motion.
Okay, so I have a motion by Ms. Debbi Moore and a second by Ms. Montgomery to table this until we get further information for the next meeting of which we're requiring from the city. Can I please get a roll call vote on the motion at hand? Oh, any further discussion? I apologize. No further discussion. Can I please get a roll call vote?
This is on the motion to table item number 1 on the amended agenda. Mr. Michael Harris,
Yes.
Mr. George Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Sharon Thomas,
Yes.
Ms. Brooke Montgomery,
Yes.
Ms. Veronica Archuleta,
Yes.
Mr. Ron Fitzherbert,
Yes.
Mr. Doug Cowan, Mr. Doug Cowan, Mr. Cowan seems to be absent. Ms. Susan Greenwald,
Yes.
Ms. Darleen Martinez. Ms. Darleen Martinez is absent. Ms. Darleen Lopez,
Yes.
Madam Vice Chair,
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you for that. Motion does pass. Okay, moving on. Since we did switch the discussion items for childcare in the City of Las Cruces business fee schedule, we do have our two presenters here for childcare from the LCS. We have Dr. Sharon Trujillo. From Boys and Girls Club, we do have Ashley Echevarria. So we're going to go ahead and talk about that. I know Ms. Debbi Moore, you helped us get these two on this call today. So I don't know if you want to give a little introduction and a little brief of what we're going to be talking about today.
Mr. Chair, Debbi Moore for the record. Of course, I'd be delighted to do so. I have been working side by side with Dr. Trujillo and Ms. Echevarria for about 2 months now in this regard. And they do have an update. I know there's been some changes, some things that I think it would be good for this board to hear. So at first, I'm going to introduce Dr. Sharon Trujillo.
Good morning, everybody. Sorry I was a little bit late. We were on a different call. So I'm frantically sending Debbi messages, so I appreciate the accommodation. Ashley has been part of our reentry plan as well as Debbi Moore when we started talking at the very beginning of the summer of what is school going to look like when we come back in the fall. And it's just an ever-changing target that public schools are held to a standard, and then the standard shifts and changes. And I think a lot of people think that we have the power to make those decisions at the local level, and in some cases we do. But it's almost as if you can make those decisions at the local level, but you have to meet these 1,700 requirements in order to open. The newest one is now like increasing our filtration systems, and that came out late last week. So now everybody's scrambling across the state to do that. So we've had districts that opened and then closed, had kids in the buildings, and then did not have anybody the next day. So that's really more than anything what we're trying to avoid is that open close scenario. The other thing that we were told at the end of last week is not to do any timelines or plans for middle school and high school. So to us, rather than putting out that false hope. At this time, we're not doing any timelines or plans for middle school and high school reentry. Our school board will be voting on Tuesday on a plan for whether or not we choose to try to go hybrid or just remain fully remote to the end of the first semester. That is the recommendation or part of the recommendations that we will present to the board for them to consider, is really looking at, you know, remaining in a remote environment and bringing in small groups of students that need that extra support. In terms of the daycare, or we like to call it now the child supervision, and I'm going to turn it over to Ashley, but probably, I think, like Debbie said, about 2 months ago, we got together, you know, the groups of daycare providers and child supervision providers that are working with our students locally. We started meeting on a bi-weekly basis. So at this point, we've had 3 different meetings. Our group has kind of grown. So it includes, you know, Boys and Girls Club, all of the standard daycares, Gym Magic, the City of Las Cruces, all of those agencies that are providing those services. Part of the biggest issue that we've found is trying to coordinate training for those childcare providers. So all of our students are using Canvas. So we've offered that training to those daycare providers to learn Canvas, to try and figure out how to help their students that are on various different schedules. At the last meeting, you know, really trying to say, all right, give us the names of the students, what schools and teachers they have, and we'll put those teachers together to also further help coordinate those efforts for the students at the facilities. As we look at reopening, part of the issue is we are required to have students in very strict cohorts, but then if you have child supervision and daycare providers that have students from 7 or 8 different schools at different grade levels, then it makes it very difficult for us to do cohorting. So those are parts of the discussions that we're having. It was very interesting to see in the paper this past weekend about daycare providers really being at a very limited registration capacity. And you know, we think that demand is there, but then the numbers don't necessarily reflect that. As we poll our parents, just, you know, over and over again, in terms of do you want to stay fully remote or go hybrid? Really, when parents are voting or when there's that need, they need that all day, every day option. And I think, like, once everybody starts to realize that even in a hybrid model, it's only 2 days a week at the building and then 3 days remote, that makes it very difficult. So I know that there are private schools that have been able to reopen, and that's awesome. Kudos to them, but they're held to a very different standard in terms of what they're able to do. They can operate as a small business, so they're operating under the very same restrictions that you're operating under. And us as a public school have to meet the requirements every day. Honestly, if you had to sit in on any of our calls every single day, they change. One of the good things that I would say, and after this comment, I'll turn it over to Ashley, is that every call that we are on, either with the early childhood education department or the PED, they consistently point out the collaboration that they're seeing here in Las Cruces between our child supervision providers and the public schools. That's not necessarily a conversation that's happening in other communities. And we've been able to make some really great connections and putting people together to share licenses, to internet, all of these other things that, you know, we find ourselves in. That's collaborative problem solving mode rather than competitive, you know, non-communicative mode, which I think is happening in other places. So With that, I'll turn it over to Ashley, and then we're happy to take any questions.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. As Dr. Trujillo said, I've been working, I feel like I've been seeing Dr. Trujillo on a Zoom at least, like every other day at this point between all the meetings. But we, at the Boys and Girls Club, we're kind of in an interesting situation because we're not necessarily licensed childcare. We're an out of school time provider. And so that kind of changes the dynamic as far as what's allowed for us, what isn't allowed for us. And as Dr. Trujillo said, something about us that I feel is pretty unique compared to most licensed childcare is we don't stop serving kids when they turn 10, 11, 12. We serve kids from kindergarten all the way till they're seniors in high schools. And so when we start talking about cohorting kids and whatnot at different schools, and I look at our operational model, typically during non-COVID times, we're serving kids from just about every school in Las Cruces, elementary, middle, and high school. And so it is a little scary whenever you start thinking about a hybrid model and the schools wanting to keep kids in specific cohorts, and then we're bringing kids to one building from all over town. And so it's interesting. When the schools closed back in March, I definitely struggled with the decision of, what do we do? Do we stay open? Because that's our calling, to be here to serve kids and families. But if it's not safe for them to be in schools, how is it safe for them to be with us? And so we did close. Now, as this has gone on for quite a while now, we decided in the summer, in July, to just kind of dip our feet in the water and see what it would be like to serve kids during these times. Under the governor's orders back then, we were limited to a 1-to-5 ratio. So 1 staff member to 5 kids, cohorts of 5. Because of the way our building is designed, while our building space is always a challenge, even during normal times, but even more so with this, this allowed us to only serve 25 kids. Just like Dr. Trujillo said, I expected 25 kids. I expected us just to have this huge demand. And, we were going to do a lottery. I was thinking we're going to have to turn away tons of kids. And I think we ended up with right around 30 kids registered. So we waitlisted 5. I can tell you those first couple days, enough kids didn't show up. So we ended up calling back the waitlisted kids. So it's really interesting because you hear a lot about, I think when you're looking at it from the economic development standpoint, you're really looking at it because all of these businesses and employers are saying, well, my employees need childcare. But then when you look at it from our perspective, the demand, it's just really interesting, doesn't seem to be there. So my only thing for summer was we did a 4-week program. So I thought, maybe our numbers are low. One, because parents have kind of already figured out what they're doing for summer. We didn't open till the middle of July. I thought the other thing was, we only did a half day. So we were open from 12:30 to 5:30. I thought, well, maybe that wasn't convenient for parents. And so when we looked at what we were going to do for the school year, we started calling our parents, our regular parents who send their kids pretty regularly. We tried the Survey Monkey way back when, and of course, nobody responds to those. So we ended up picking up the phone and calling parents. And most of the parents that we talked to that said they'd be willing or in need of sending their kids to us said, only if we can do a full day program. And so I think we ended up having like 33 parents that said, yes, full day. So we were getting ready to reopen under the notion again that we could only serve 25 kids. We closed registration on Wednesday with 38 kids registered. So I was prepared to have to turn 13 kids away. On Thursday, the governor did her press conference and changed the public health order. And we received word from our lobbyists, we have a lobbyist for Boys and Girls Clubs, that we were able to increase our ratios to 1 to 10. So that would mean we could safely serve 50 kids in our building. So I was like, great news, we don't have to turn anybody away. So we called everybody back, all 38 kids. And I can tell you when we opened on September 1st, we had 29 kids that day. Our most well-attended day was actually yesterday with 31 kids. So it's really interesting, just, you know, the dynamics, because I do, you know, when we're talking to traditional childcare providers, we're also hearing that most of them are only operating at about 60% of what they're allowed to do. For us, what I've noticed is I would say we probably have about 50% of the kids that are coming are our regular club members that we're used to seeing every day. And then the other half, maybe even a little less than half, are new kids that are, you know, really in need. So that's kind of been interesting too. But, you know, we're open. We've been open. We started last week, September 1st. We're open 7:30 to 5:30 every day. The kids are getting a breakfast and a lunch, thanks to the public schools. And then we're also serving them a supper at the end of the day, because we also do curbside suppers for the community. And we're providing as much support with their virtual schooling as we possibly can. We do have Wi-Fi in the building. It's definitely been a little bit of a challenge just managing all of the different schedules, especially for the younger kids. We have one group of kids that's all first graders, and that's a lot of fun. but we're managing. And doing the best we can. And so just, you know, in addition to helping them with their virtual schooling, we also sprinkle in our regular programs. So we do everything from STEM to arts and crafts, physical fitness, recreation, et cetera. You know, of course, following all of the safe COVID practices. But it's interesting, as I've told Dr. Trujillo before, you know, I do see that the longer the schools are closed, the more high of a demand there's probably going to be. I think a lot of parents are just waiting for the schools to make a decision so that they can figure out a long-term plan. But at the same time, I'm not sure. I don't know what to expect from day to day as far as registration goes. You know, we were very fortunate to receive some funding from the city. I think it was last week. The city passed a resolution to help support several nonprofits in town with their COVID-19 efforts. And we were fortunate to receive some additional funding to help support this effort, because obviously going from a half day to a full day, it's pretty expensive on us, especially as far as staffing is concerned and operating at such low ratios. And then we had also talked about the need for possibly expanding into another building, either, you know, a city building. We talked about the school building. We talked about that, but as of today, we don't really have that need. I don't know what that's going to look like after next week's school board meeting. That may be different. But, you know, we are here, you know, I've prepared my leadership team to say, you know, be ready, because if we do expand, you know, we would even be open to helping out. You know, I think about some of the bigger businesses like hospitals and, the public school systems and NMSU, who have parents who are working. And I've thought, you know, well, even if we approach individual businesses and said, hey, if you'll give us a couple rooms, we will send staff out to assist and to do programming with. But at this point, the need hasn't really been there. So that's kind of where we're at. I'm actually looking out my office window right now, watching a bunch of kids sitting on different devices, spread 6 feet apart, and getting their schoolwork done. And so it's been interesting. We're here. We're happy to help. But I'm unclear on, you know, 25,000 students in the LCPS school system, Dr. Trujillo, is that right? And
what else about that?
About 25,000 students in the school
We
district.
have about 24,500, yeah.
Yeah, and so you take all those kids and we're only seeing about 30. So it's kind of, it's interesting. But I'll stand for any questions. Sorry, Dr. Trujillo, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was gonna say, and that's across the board, like you said, with all of the other child supervision providers of school-age children, that they're, you know, it's 20 here, 30 here. I would say probably being served at all of the childcare providers citywide on a full day basis, it's less than 200. I mean, I think that's even aiming high.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much for, I mean, you answered so many questions that we've had over the last 2 weeks. I'm not gonna lie. But we do have a couple of, we have one hand being raised. Ms. Montgomery, take it away.
Thank you, Chris. Brooke Montgomery for record. Thank you. That did clarify. We've been discussing this a lot. So questions came up, and then as they came up, sometimes you answered them, Ashley. So I was trying to cross them off. I guess just clarifying, putting aside the school board vote, because we don't know the outcome of that. If parents, do you think if parents thought the schools are not going to reopen, like if there was like a timeline and they said elementary, we'll focus on elementary because of daycare more. But I mean, you may be seeing middle school, and maybe that's something we need to know too, because they are pretty young to stay home all day alone if parents work. So let's say middle school and elementary aren't going back. Do you think there would be an increase in interest from the parents if there was just a decision made that for the rest of the semester or for the rest of the school year? I don't know if that's way too long to say, but something of that nature. We just know that the kids are not going back from certain grades, and that they may say, okay, now that we know that, we need to go to like do this model of virtual learning centers, because maybe they're sticking on like, and I think you may have said that, and and Karen also may have said that, holding on to like our kids may go back. So that was my number one question. And then number two was, are they getting assistance with paying through what the city resolution was and or through childcare assistance? And are there some people that don't qualify and can't get assistance paying if they're working? Would that also be a barrier? And I don't know if that's already kind of something that's been addressed. So the cost for parents, especially.
Yeah, so regarding that, so it's kind of interesting because we're not licensed childcare. So the licensed childcare facilities, while they are a lot more expensive than what we charge, parents can apply for assistance through CYFD for that. The difference with our program is we do charge a weekly rate. It's probably, it's a lot less than what I think childcare is probably like what, $300 a week. Right now we're charging our regular fee for a full day. We're charging $75 a week. I can tell you that 60% of the kids that are coming right now aren't paying $75 a week. They're paying much less. So the funding that we get from the city, even outside of that resolution, we typically get funding from the city to help us offset some of our expense so that we never turn a kid away for the inability to pay. We try to work with the families and do some type of a sliding scale fee. And then, there are some extenuating circumstances, where grandma's on a fixed income and raising 4 kids. And, some parents are paying $5 a week, maybe, $10 a week. So we really try to practice not turning anybody away for the inability to pay. When we do our advertising, I do always include, there are scholarships available, but it may turn some people away to just see the fee and get discouraged. I'm not sure. And then regarding your other question, I think at least from my perspective, if if parents do hear that schools, aren't going to open through the rest of the semester, through the rest of the school year, I do think there will be a higher need. Just from what we've seen, it seems like every day we're getting more phone calls about enrollment. And so that's what I think. I don't know what you think, Dr. Trujillo.
I think you're probably right, but I will tell this group, and again, this is not like decision has not been made. It will be made on Tuesday. But our proposal is that that we do just remain closed for the remainder of the semester, and that we serve our special education students, which by law we have to, and then work with very small groups of students, like in that 5-to-1 ratio, for the remainder of the semester at every grade level. So that is the recommendation that we are making to the board. The fact that Doña Ana County, again, who knows, at 4 o'clock this afternoon, that might change. But right now we're at in that orange phase, which technically is not between, everybody gets kind of confused. It's like, oh, is that between red and yellow? And it's like, no, they should have picked a different color. They really should have picked a different color because it gives that confusion. But yeah, I mean, that's the recommendation we're making, because logistically, if we're thinking about cohorting, we're thinking about school buses. Now they're saying like, oh, all your air filtration systems need to be replaced, like all of that stuff. And honestly, it changes daily. It changed this morning. So our recommendation is going to be that fine, give us until January. Let's make the online environment as robust as we can and provide the support in that area as best as we can. I would appreciate it that you do not necessarily talk about that, because again, it is a board decision, but that's where I think we're leaning. In terms of a recommendation. But what I don't want is the board to say, oh, great, now the city of Las Cruces and all the people that were on that meeting on Thursday said that the superintendent said that this is what we're going to do. And that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that's the recommendation based on the constraints that we're under. And that's not any different than the other regional districts. Gadsden's in the same boat. They voted last week to basically kind of wait and see. Hatch is in the same boat. They had their school board meeting last night. And, with all of the unknowns, we're just kind of put in that position.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I think we had Mr. Harris, Miss Sharon Thomas, and then Mr. Miller. And guys, I do want to just remind you all that it is 11:13. And we do try to wind up by 11:30. And I know that this is a hot topic, so I understand that, but I just wanted to throw that out there before I get my warning sign.
All right, thanks. This is Michael Harris for the record. Yeah, thanks for all that information. That was really good. I have a question and then a comment that I was asked to pass along. I guess I'll echo the comments first. I'll echo the need for consistency from the people I've talked to, employees, friends, family. Consistency and knowing, well, one, knowing what's going to happen. Obviously, everyone's waiting and seeing, and that's causing a lot of stress for the people I know for sure. And then also something that was brought up and is the training of teachers on Canvas and how they're doing the remote learning, and kind of the consistency and expectations, because they're seeing as parents that even within like the classroom, they're not certain like how certain things are going to affect their child's grades or stuff like that going forward. So that was a comment I was asked to pass along. And then I guess my question is, one way or the other, remote learning is going to be, a pretty big part of what goes on. Are you seeing barriers to that in terms of internet access from local families or people who are slightly outside the city who still come to Las Cruces schools. And, you know, maybe something we could recommend is, you know, ways for the city to help improve internet access for families.
Thank you so much for both your question and your comment. I agree, like that piece of the consistency, like anything, right? You have those that are like, oh, this is awesome, I'm gonna do, and look at my beautiful Canvas homepage. And I mean, it's just this great thing, right? And then others that are just like, how do I turn on my computer? And really trying to figure out what are your minimum standard expectations for teachers and how do we support them? So we have those structures in place with those minimum expectations. I think something that we did as a district that really didn't happen in other places, two things. A lot of other districts just thought, you know, oh, okay, well, we're just going to do access, which is like pre-packaged curriculum that there's not really any kind of direct instruction or interaction with students from an actual teacher, and that's what they're depending on. We did not do that. We did decide that we were going to go with Canvas, and we understand like that learning curve for some I mean, it was steep. I'm not gonna, you know, there's no way to get around that. The thing that we've seen now is that we provided professional development throughout the summer. Those people who took advantage of that paid professional development throughout the summer are obviously further along, right, than others. One. Two, we as a district created basically like Canvas course shells that had assignments, the instructional guides, like all of the baseline must-have things for every class from kindergarten through 12th grade. All the AP classes, physics, chemistry, algebra, whatever, with recommended assignments, all of the different pieces. So thank God, you know, that the teachers didn't have to start from scratch, right? They didn't have to start from zero. Well, in the conversations that we've had with our professional development people is that, you know, the first couple of weeks, it was very technology-based questions, or how do I put an assignment? I mean, it was those very basic Canvas operating system kinds of questions. Now, when they're asking questions like, how do I embed this video and put a quiz in it for my students to do? So like now they're getting into the instructional questions. Does that make sense? So it's kind of like they're not learning that the primary pieces anymore. Now it's very much instructional and learning questions. So for us, that's very encouraging because it's kind of like everybody kind of got over that initial hump, and now it's really more focused on student engagement and student learning. So that's great. The second piece is the internet access that you asked about. The city of Las Cruces very initially in their first allocation of funds allocated $150,000 for the public school system for exactly that, for internet access. So we did do the partnership with Comcast, and we have the Comcast Cares funding that as a district we're paying for. So we've been given whatever, a couple thousand codes that we've give to families. And then they sign up for the Comcast Cares and we pay for it as a district, but we're using city funds to do that. So that's huge. Unfortunately, there are, you know, we worked with Comcast to say like, hey, don't require them to put in a social security number. Don't require them to do, you know, they were asking for like all of these pieces of information that we just have residents that they're like, I'm not answering that. You know, I'm in a mixed status family and I'm not putting that down, because then, you know, there's that fear factor. So we've really tried to work with them to say, look, we're paying for it. Just let us, you know, let's not make it a burden or a barrier for families. So we've had, I think it's closer to 500 families that have signed up for that. So that's a good thing, one. Two, we do have people that are outside of that Comcast service area. So we are working with Cahoots, which is it's a filtered hotspot that we've distributed over 300 hotspots. I mean, and that's at a cost of over $1 million, probably $1.5 million for the district. So what we really need so we're trying to, at the teacher level, working with a kid and saying, do you have internet at home? And if that answer is no, then it's like, okay, then you all need to call Bridget at central office. She'll get you figured out. If you're in a Comcast area, she'll walk you through that process. If you're not, we'll get you a hotspot. We have families that have 5 kids in an outlying area, and 1 hotspot isn't enough. So we even have some families that have 2 because they can't, you know, it's not functional for them to just have 1. So we've really tried our very best to meet those needs. And if there are families that still don't have that, have them call their teacher and their principal. I mean, there's no shame or embarrassment or any, you know, like we really truly are trying to figure that out. The city of Las Cruces, and Robert Nunez yesterday in our meeting was saying that, you know, 6 weeks ago in our first meeting, he's like, we can't help kids with classes because our city facilities don't have internet. We don't have Wi-Fi. And since then, so in the last 6 weeks, now they have, you know, 5 designated areas that now they have Wi-Fi where they say like, okay, now we can bring in kids to do tutoring and to help them with those pieces. So I think more than anything, it's getting those city facilities situated so that that Wi-Fi is enabled and ready for access. Not even if it's not for a daycare or child supervision all day every day, but just to, hey, come and sit in our building, in our lobby, if your internet's not working and you can do your stuff here. So hopefully those answered your questions.
Thank you for that. I think that's actually some really good information, especially about the Wi-Fi and how to get connected for anyone that's not. We do have Ms. Sharon Thomas and Mr. George Miller, and I do want to remind you guys that it is 11:21, and I know it's really amazing to have these 2 amazing individuals on with us today. But some of us do have jobs to get back to too. So Ms. Sharon Thomas, go ahead, and then we'll go to Mr. Miller.
Okay, I'll keep it very short. So I'm really impressed by what the Las Cruces schools are doing, and I'm happy to see you're working with the city. It's really amazing, and the fact that we have people that are willing to collaborate and coordinate their work, that's fantastic. My question is, so if the school board decides that you're going to be totally remote for the rest of the semester, and the parents then are going to start looking for, you know, daycare or child, what's it called? Child
supervision.
Is there a way to get that information out to everybody? So what kind of access do you have to communicate with all the families? You know, would it help to have Chamber of Commerce and the city and, you know, other entities get information out to people so they know who to call and where to go and what to do to get child supervision?
Great question. So we actually do have, I mean, for example, Robert Nunez, again, from the city, they're expanding their tutoring services. We put it on our website, on our Twitter, on our Facebook, but we also have access to send that information directly to parents and students. So if our next meeting in 2 weeks with our child supervision providers, it's like, hey, have your flyers ready, what you're able to do, how many spots you have available, and we'll get that information out directly to our families.
Thank you. So there are a number of listservs, and all the counselors have lists for their districts. And so, you know, there are other ways we could maybe help get information out.
That'd be great. Yeah, because
Awesome.
Not everybody reads the paper and not everybody's online.
Right.
True. Thank you for that. Mr. Miller.
Yes, Mr. Miller, for the record, I would withdraw my question. I think I had the same ideas about that Sharon Thomas had, and so those were just answered very well about the communication of what's available to the parents and to the students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Okay, with that being said, I think we have some really good information that was presented today, especially about, I think the biggest thing that's going to be the biggest question on everyone's minds right now is going to be those virtual learning centers, depending on what happens at the next meeting. I think there's going to be a lot of questions coming forward, but I think we do know a lot of things that are able to alleviate, the burden on families, and that's, Wi-Fi. I live in a rural area and we don't have high-speed internet. So, I'm fortunate that I can pay for that, but there's a lot of people that can't. Now we know as a board how we can get that to those individuals that come in and talk to us. We're all involved in the community. That's why we're here. So that's really good information. One question that I have before we do kind of move on, with the meetings going on in Hatch and Gadsden, with Cruces being one of the biggest school districts in the state, are we kind of leading the charge, or are we collabing with those entities that are close to us and making decisions for the future? Do you know what that looks like? I know that we're leaders here in Las Cruces, but I know that also there's a lot of people that are coming in from out of county and all that great stuff. So I just wanted to know what that looks like for us.
Great question. So no, I talk to Mike and Travis all the time, and even Arsenio and Deming and Jarrett Perry and Alamogordo. So we even have our own little text string, okay, what are you doing? What are your plans looking like? What's your calendar? So we definitely collaborate with them. I think in terms of the coordination with child supervision and childcare providers, we're probably, if not the only, one of the few communities that are really doing that to the level where we're doing it. I'm thankful that, we actually started this collaboration before COVID. So even since last January, we were meeting with after school providers and trying to coordinate and say, okay, there's multiple providers that are serving Central Elementary, for example, had 4 different agencies that were at Central, but then down the street at Valley View didn't have any. So we were trying to figure out okay, if you're serving this school, what other agency can pick up this school? So we were trying to figure out how we could have universal coverage for all of our schools. So that's, which again goes to that, we have to collaborate with each other, right? That kind of attitude of working together. So we already knew each other. We were already meeting on a regular basis. So when we set up these meetings, we didn't have to go out and find names. We said, hey, Yolanda, pull that list, send it to them. And so to me, that kind of gives me chills in thinking that, Las Cruces is just a very unique community that way. I think we just, there's no way we can make everybody happy. We know that. But our goal is to make everybody safe as much as possible and really try to work together to figure out what those solutions are moving forward. So we'll continue to do that. And if you all have anything to add, please feel free to reach out. I'm very accessible. Chris, that. Debbie, that. So please, honestly though, because, we come up with ideas and things. It's much more powerful if you have great minds working together on the same problem rather than just relying on a small group of people to figure it out. So
definitely.
Cool. Thank you guys.
Thank you. And thank you both for your amazing leadership during this time. We really do appreciate everything that you're doing. It's great to see everything happening.
Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Bye-bye. Have a good day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, ladies. Okay, so they just hopped off. That was great to have them both here today. I know that their schedules have to be insane right now with everything going on. So hopefully that answered a lot of the questions that we had, and hopefully us as a board can help distribute the information that we learned today and get that out to people that maybe don't know of what's going on. But once again, it is a day-to-day type thing. So I'm hoping that we got some questions answered, and I'm sure there's going to be more. Do we have any other comments, questions, or concerns on childcare? I know that this is going to be an ongoing discussion topic, I'm sure, so that's probably something that we need to maybe brainstorm a little bit more on and see what we can offer to the city to help us do with that. Any other comments, questions, or concerns before we move on for the day? Okay, as I'm seeing none, Ms. Darleen Lopez, we are going to do hopefully a brief update on what the Workforce Connection Scholarship update looks like. Take it away, Ms. Lopez.
Okay, let me get my screen up here. Oh, wait. Oh, yes, I can share. Okay. Okay, can you guys see?
Yes, you're good to go.
All right, Darleen Lopez for the record. Hello, everyone. I just, there's still a lot of elements that we're trying to work out on this. So I just want to first and foremost lay that out. But this is just kind of the direction that we're going and what we're proposing. And we're still trying to work through some of the things that we're not even sure, some things may not be possible. And so those are the things that we're working through. But overall, we have this I guess mission, if you will, of creating an additional resource for financial support for individuals who may not meet the requirements for other types of aid and are seeking training and credentials to help them earn a living wage. So these numbers right here are numbers that are estimates. I'm working on getting some more solid numbers about how many students per term, and I mean spring, fall, summer, and how much we're spending in supportive services, meaning everything outside of tuition, like maybe they need help with childcare, maybe they need transportation, maybe they need us to help them pay for some eyeglasses, whatever it is that may be a barrier to them attaining their goals. We try to help them with. And then per term for the tuition assistance itself. And so I'm working to get some more concrete numbers. It's a little more challenging because for our program, the numbers that we can get at a glance are more of a holistic number and what we've spent per individual per term. And that's a number that includes all of that. So if this person was in an RN program and they needed to pay for the NCLEX so they can become registered, that's going to be included. If they had that any form of supportive service, that's going to be included. So, we're seeing an average, of about $4,000 per person in total. So it just varies. Some of these people, they're going for technical trades where the equipment that they need is expensive. So the tuition itself isn't very expensive, but then they need, let's say like for welding, they need protective gear, they need steel toe boots, they need whatever. So, all that stuff is included. So that's what we're trying to kind of pull apart so that we can get a really good, accurate estimate to propose to council over what kind of money we should be setting aside for this. The workforce with WIOA dollars has been able to fill in gaps where FAFSA and other student aid was unable to. Although the act is engineered to help those disadvantaged groups, there are still limitations to who we can serve. That is where the training award program would come in to serve those. We could serve even if it's just for one term. So that's kind of the thing, is that they may not live on this award program. So they come to us this term for some extenuating circumstance, then maybe next term they go back to Title I or to WIOA, and we can fund them that term. So it's kind of just a safety net, really. So the groups that we're currently being underserved, non-citizen customers, customers who hit their lifetime limit with FAFSA and grants and scholarships, customers who are above the income guidelines but are being considered with income not their own, example, a spouse, a partner, a roommate, parent, or other family member's income, customers who miss the deadline to apply for FAFSA or WIOA. So if they come to us the day classes start, that's too late. We can't fund them that term. So then we could say, okay, let's roll over to the award program and see if we can get you funding that way for this term. Customers who are enrolled in a LEAP or alternative licensure program at a school that's already receiving federal dollars, which prohibits other federal funding. So as you guys have probably heard, we are partnering with the public schools, not only in Las Cruces, but in other parts of the region, to get more teachers. And we're hoping to help individuals who may already have some credits under their belt go ahead and get over that hump and get to their level, what is it, the level 1 licensing or whatever. I'm not exactly sure the terms, I don't want to misuse them. But that program has its limitations because, of course, some schools have federal, the same type of federal funding that we use to put people through these programs. And so that's like kind of, some firewall breaching there to use both types of funding in the same school. So some schools are cool, they can do it, some schools can't. So we are working to fix that issue, but as you know, those are things that take acts of Congress and it takes time. So this could be something that this program could help fill the gap in the meantime. Any other extenuating circumstances that should be determined using a set of objective evaluation criteria on a case-by-case basis. Those seeking training in a field that is not in demand by governing agencies' definition. Training will be specific to entrepreneurial development and will be determined using objective evaluation criteria. So basically those folks that are wanting to start a business and maybe just need support, need training, need some kind of credential, maybe they need accounting, managerial accounting. They know their craft, they've got their craft down, but they don't know the business side. They don't know the accounting side, and they need that training. So then the concept is that the step one is that they apply for FAFSA. Step two, they apply for WIOA with us through the workforce. And then step three is to apply for the training award program, which is the one we're working with the city on. And then ultimately, you know, that documentation kind of serves as the proof that, hey, I went through all the channels that I needed to make sure that I exhausted everything else and then came here last. Applications are submitted each term and include documentation from the FAFSA and WIOA with determinations. And the payout process is being determined. You know, some of the things that we're discussing is, you know, maybe just doing a request for payment on behalf of the student, or maybe, you know, we figure out some kind of a mechanism where, you know, we're working through the student or either directly agency to agency. We're working with, of course, the city's legal entity as well as our administrative entity to make sure that we do everything within compliance. So that information to come. The ultimate goal is to create a system that is working towards a point where no one in Las Cruces who wishes to work towards a self-sustaining and livable wage through training has to be turned away. Now we know that that's going to take time to get to that point, but we want to be working towards it. What's next? The workforce will work with the city to develop training and guidelines and policies for the program, and we'll be putting all information before our legal entities for review. We anticipate changes to the plan as it gets finalized, and we will be updating the board regularly. Should this program be approved by all entities involved, this would be submitted as a recommendation by the board to city council. So we'll, you know, basically at that point, we'll be bringing it back to you all to have you make a recommendation officially to the city council. And I'll stand for questions. You're on mute, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that on both notes. I appreciate this amazing presentation that you gave us. It was very, very well done and very informative. And it answered a lot of the questions that we've had over the last couple of weeks. So with that being said, it looks like Ms. Sharon Thomas, you do have a question. I will remind everyone really quick, it is 11:38. So hopefully we can wrap up in the next like 6 to 8 minutes. So Ms. Sharon Thomas.
Yeah, just a quick question. Darlene, you said you've been working with city legal, so they're okay with this. We don't have any anti-donation issues over this kind of a program?
As of this point, because we're going to be making an MOU between ourselves, the workforce. So I've been, you know, Steve's been working with us too, Sharon. And so because we're going to be formulating an MOU, that's going to resolve that issue of the anti-donation clause. But we are definitely not in a position to say that everything that I have presented today is 100% good to go, because like I said, once they have fully evaluated this concept really got a hard framework yesterday. You know, we've had a concept for a while now, but yesterday was the first work session where we really came out with, okay, this is how we see this working. And these are the details of how this is going to flow. So now that we have that, that's what we need to have set before the workforce development board, and then also set before the legal on the city side to get approval on both ends.
So and was legal part of any of these discussions? Or?
I'll have to turn to Francisco on that one.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Board Member Sharon Thomas. As Workforce Connections is a government entity. Usually, the way in which we can work with government entities would be through an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding. This is, of course, still pending that we draft the entire proposal and we submit it through our entire process still. So this is not yet in the form or in the shape to be presented completely because we need to still draft some extra changes. But at this stage, this is where it is at. So this would need to be drafted in a way in which it would go to legal, and then with legal, we would be able to discuss what is the best route to it. Nevertheless, Workforce Connections is a government entity. So since it's a government entity, the approach is a bit different. So nevertheless, we are still going to have that meeting. We'll submit that proposal once we draft it and we have it kind of ready. But that is a stage that we still have to follow. So there's still more work to be done. This is a big project still. Nevertheless, it is something that we have to cross our T's and dot our I's correctly so that we know that everything is right. Does that answer your question?
Well, I know that it's often different when you're working government entity to government entity, and I sit on the workforce board too. I guess I just need some assurance from legal that what you said, government to government is different, and in that it's highly likely that MOU will be the way to go and that we don't have to worry about anti-donation. But I hate to see Darleen go too far before we have at least some assurance from legal that government to government is different.
Right, and usually the process, how it follows is that we have an actual proposal drafted, right? The actual proposal drafted as how we think, and we start having the conversations with legal at that stage. Nevertheless, we have worked with other government entities in a similar fashion. So that is a possibility that has been explored, just to put it like that. So the next stages would be to go to actually drafting this in an overall proposal, putting it to legal, and then getting the information from there. But I think that this stage, this is where we are at. So this is still pending. That's what I want to be very clear. This is still pending, but I think it's a great proposal. So we'll see where it takes us.
I think legal can quickly answer the general question about government to government. And so I guess I'd like to have that information as soon as possible.
Right, and this is Francisco Payares for the record. We'll lead legal. We'll contact legal and see what they respond. I couldn't speak for them, so that's something that they would have to respond. So.
Okay, thank you. I mean, having been on the council for many years, I'm very aware of the anti-donation issues, and I just need some assurance from legal that we're heading in the right direction.
Awesome. Thank you, Francisco, for clearing that up. And Sharon, absolutely. We'll, as we are getting more information and feedback, we will be updating the board, and that's a very top item priority. So making sure that we're heading in the right direction is definitely there. Unfortunately, yeah, we got to kind of build this thing to get them to answer us usually, because they say, well, what if we don't know what you're asking us? We need to know the full picture before we can answer your question. So unfortunately, that's usually the way it has to go. But I believe that we can maybe get some general guidance on the onset so that we can bring that back to the board and give that reassurance you're looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Darleen. I really appreciate it. Griselda, you had your hand raised, but you took it down. Are you good? Ms.
Mr.
Martinez?
Chair, I just wanted to summarize what Darleen and Francisco mentioned. As Darleen mentioned, the review of this proposal really targeting the gaps that Workforce Connections sees. I think that was the biggest gap of information that Darleen had to really go dig into what those areas were. And so the next step is for us to evaluate with our legal team, and that would be the go or no go. The government to government agreement, it would be if this project as is, it's a viable project from the legal perspective, with the recommended audiences served and the award program. So just wanted to summarize to make sure that that was clear.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that clarification. I do appreciate that. With that being said, Darleen, if you can stop sharing your screen, and we are going to continue on a little bit since I don't see any more hands raised. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, with that being said, we have had our 3 discussion items for the day. Any other questions for Darleen before we move on? I am seeing none. It is currently 11:45, so let's wrap this up. With that being said, future discussion items. One of the future discussion items for sure will be the City of Las Cruces business fee schedule. We are going to be looking at that in detail next week after we get a couple questions answered, which I'm going to work with city staff on, and we're going to get those questions figured out. With that being said, I'm going to open it up to any other discussion items that anyone might want to have. Darleen, I don't know if you think we need to discuss this again next week in detail, or if you think it's just going to be week by week play. What are your thoughts on this?
I think moving forward, I don't really need, I mean, I'm not at this point, not at this stage. I don't think I really need like a slot. I think I could just do a quick update. If there were any updates to give, then I can just pipe up during the open comments and give that information.
Okay, perfect. Good with me. Mr. Miller, I saw your hand raised next, sir.
Yes, George Miller for the record. This one came from the briefing from the transportation folks of the bus service. I was going through my notes and I saw there was some discussion about the city has waived the fees now for transportation. One actionable item could be to continue that, make that a permanent fixture. I think the transportation folks said it wasn't that big a income for them anyway. So it might be something that incentivizes workers to be able to get to their workplaces and things like that. That's one.
Okay, Sharon, Miss Sharon Thomas, do you know if there was a date put on the fee structure for public transportation?
Yeah, no, I don't, because I work more with the county transportation than the city. But you're right, you know, the fare is a very little part of the budget, and lots of cities have free transit service. And we're going to be looking into doing more transit, the county transit anyway, but possibly a fast bus that goes from Las Cruces to Santa Teresa to the jobs down there. We're going to be talking about that next Friday. And so, you know, there's lots and lots of jobs down there. They have a 50% turnover. And so we need to find ways to get people there. And Workforce, Darleen will be there too. Workforce Connection needs to talk about just what kinds of skills they need so that we actually have workers they can keep and work with rather than the high turnover. So there are over 1,000 jobs down there. And so as people coming out of this COVID thing and needing a new job, that's a place we need to work on pretty directly.
And that's with the county transportation, correct?
Pardon?
And that's with the county transportation services?
Yeah, yes, we're looking at doing a bus that will take people to those jobs, but it also needs to be people who are trained correctly for what those jobs. We're trying to find out what it is they need in terms of training. So, you know, Darleen will be working on that part.
Right. Sounds like we're going to need that to the Workforce Connection Scholarship sooner than later. Okay, perfect. So I think that's actually good, Mr. Miller. I think we're going to go ahead and do that because it seems like a very simple conversation to have with a very quick actionable item, which I love right now. So far we have the Las Cruces fee schedule. and looking at that, and then the city transit fees, and maybe even talking with Sharon about the county transit fees and seeing if we can get something going on that and make some recommendations that we push those out maybe throughout maybe spring or maybe the next couple of years, who knows. Ms. Greenwald, you have your hand raised next.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Susan Greenwald for the record. I know that the city is working with Arrowhead to do the Biz Sprint program, which is a really great program for accelerating businesses and even helping people pivot into more kind of new normal strategies post-COVID. But it's my understanding that the registration, the numbers are really low for that, even though it's free. So I was wondering if maybe we could get a presentation on the different technical assistance programs that the city is offering, and maybe make some recommendations, like a quick actionable item about promoting those, or maybe eliminating some of the barriers for people to participate in them.
Okay, Ms. Montgomery is going to talk on this, but really quick, Ms. Greenwald, that was actually like our first or second day presentation, and I think you're on the right track. And I really did want to do funding for BizSprint because, and Ms. Montgomery, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think registration was very high. It's just that the city of Las Cruces didn't fund enough spaces. And then I know that there was that 8-week crash course with the e-commerce side, which I was absolutely in love with. Ms. Montgomery, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was all to do with funding. Is that correct?
Brooke Montgomery for the record. So Griselda mentioned something about it. I was told that we did have enough. We had applicants that were over the amount that was funded. I can double check and let you know next meeting how many applicants. And the funding for our MOU with the city was for 10 businesses each cohort. And for this cohort, the next one I believe will be next month.
Yes.
So, but I will double check how many applied. Okay. If I'm remembering, Griselda had said,
I have that information.
Oh, sorry, I was like looking for you on the screen. I'm like,
yeah, I have that information if I can. So,
please, yes, of course.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, the BizSprint that Arrowhead ran at the beginning of this pandemic, it was statewide, and for that they had 240 people or businesses apply for it, out of which 43 were City of Las Cruces specific. Because of capacity limitations on that cohort, they were only able to accept 3 businesses within city limits. And because of that gap, we saw the opportunity for us to fund, and through a partnership with NMSU, a specific program for Las Cruces, which is the BizSprint. And that is 15 businesses per cohort. It is currently midway, the first one. The second one will be opening up applications in the next week for it to start beginning of October. We could send that information to you all and for you to help us promote that. For the first cohort, we had 19 applicants. And so we did have a lower number compared to the first cohort that Arrowhead did. But at the same time, as we all know, businesses were in a very different position at the beginning of the pandemic versus everything else happening and having to figure out other ways. And so we are, we have implemented recurring meetings with business support agencies within our community. And we are making sure that we're cross-referencing all this information and that we're really pushing out these items to promote and bring awareness and make sure that businesses know it's for free. It's to pivot, to find new markets, to get them going on the online presence if they don't have any. and then making sure that we do a much bigger emphasis on social media than in the previous cohort. So we're working on that to make sure that we have a larger cohort of applicants and determine if we need to expand that or this is similar to what we heard from big boys, big girls. What, I'm sorry, I got that name wrong. But it's a lot of things are moving really fast, and I think business owners are having to choose where to utilize their time. So one big item that is going to be emphasized is that we're going to be highlighting the flexibility of schedule for this program, instead of having to be at certain hours while they have to pair with business operations and other responsibilities at home. So we're on it. Thank you, Ms. Greenwald, for the highlight of that and reminding us that this is coming up, and we need to, all of us need to help us promote and ensure that these resources get to the right hands.
Awesome, thank you. Great suggestion. Glad we had that little spiel, because it was something that was really cool to me, and I talked about it forever that one meeting, but I'm glad that we were able to bring that up again. Does anyone else have any future discussion topics? Because it sounds like that one's kind of checkboxed off until they see what kind of applicants they get. Okay, so far we're going to be having a conversation next meeting about the fee schedule and about city transportation and usage, or city transportation and possibly county transportation and their fee structure. So in the meantime, everyone, you did get an email with the fee structure. Please do take a look at that, see what is, in your mind, something that we can do to alleviate anything with that. And then also we will talk about the city fees, and then come up with some really creative, out of the box things that we can talk about for future discussions next time. I know I challenged you all the last couple meetings to come up with some ideas that we can talk about. I'm going to do that again. Thank you, Mr. Miller, for your idea on the city transportation fees. That's transportation definitely boosts economies because it helps people connect with work. So that's great. So I think we're on the right track. With that being said, do we have any general announcements? Okay, as I'm seeing no general announcements being raised, if we can entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. We need a motion in a second.
This is Michael Harris. I'll motion to adjourn the meeting.
We have a motion for Mr. Harris to adjourn.
This is Ron Fitzherbert. I'll second.
And we have a second from Mr. Ron Fitzherbert. So we have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting, which means we're out of here, everyone. Have a great afternoon, and we will see you next week at the Economic Recovery Board meeting. Have a great day.